Good evening and welcome to the BS and Beer Show. BS stands for Building Science. Hopefully, we've been doing this for more than a year now. You've been here before, but if you haven't, welcome to the show tonight. We are talking about high performance building in the city. So, pretty exciting about the challenges that are going to be totally different for building in the city compared to everywhere else. I'm Emily Mottram. Tonight, I am having a lovely sparkling white wine because as much as I loved the beer last week, it didn't love me back. So moving on to sparkling white wine. BS and Beer is a grassroots movement brought to you each week by Building Science Network and people and experts in the field who volunteer their time to make this happen every week. So big thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight and volunteering your time and expertise to share with our audience members. We want to give a big shout out and thank you to Green Building Advisor and Fine Home Building for being our media partner to make sure that this happens every week, posting it both on our BS and Beer Show website, on the blog afterwards, and up on the YouTube channel. So thank you to Fine Home Building and Green Building Advisor. Off to you, Ben, for announcements.
All right. My name is Ben Bogey. I'm a project manager here in Connecticut. This evening, I'm drinking a local Two Roads Too Juicy from my favorite pint glass, which is a Keep Craft Alive pint glass with screen printing typos. I thought it's excellent to have Keep Craft Alive with typos. So if you've never been here before, you can click on the chat icon down below. When you're in the chat icon, please make sure to click all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your questions and comments. Fine Home Building sends out Zoom reminders each week. If you want to receive those as well as other information, join our mailing list at thebsandbeershow.com or check out the weekly post at Green Building Advisor. The video recording of tonight's show will be available at Green Building Advisor, and we encourage you to continue the conversation over there. All past shows can be found on YouTube and through a link at thebsandbeershow.com. If you have any burning questions or comments that you don't get answered tonight, then pop over to GBA and put them in the comment section there. An audio-only version of the BS and Beer Show is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And special announcement, you may have heard the Pretty Good House team is writing a book. They are looking for some case studies to include in it. And if you've designed or built what you consider to be a pretty good house, submit your project through the link shared in the chat box below. And with that, I welcome Mr. Trevor Holtz, our other guest and panelist this evening, and over to Travis for introductions.
Good evening. I'm Travis Brungard. I'm in Prairie Village, Kansas, drinking a Boulevard Brewing collab with Rheingeist. This is a crust fall, and it's a peach berry pie sour. Emily. Excellent pucker face. Totally worth mentioning it. So I am excited here tonight. We have three great guests. I'll first introduce Michael Anschel, who's the owner and principal of OA Design Build, whose work focuses on older homes. Mike's heavily involved in the green building movement and led the green remodeling group in the development of Minnesota Green Star certified green home certification, which is considered by some to be the most progressive and rigorous residential green building standard in the US. I think it was Sean that asked me to say, hey, Mike, what are the 5 passive house principles? And also, what are you drinking?
I have no idea what the 5 passive house principles are.
That was for the other Michael. Sorry.
I'm going to say no windows. Just kidding.
So worth it.
I'm drinking Ill Intent from Drastic Measures Brewing in Wadena, Minnesota. And it's kind of awesome. I like their stuff. And that's it, right?
I mean, if you have other things that you want to add, if you want to say, oh, I've been working on this, I'm really big into, describing the cloud forms that I see in my spare time.
Oh, yeah. Resilient House Season 2. Plug that.
Resilient House Season 2. Thank you, Ben. That's right. So Resilient House. So for those of you who missed Resiliency, Building Resilience Season 1, you can find it on protradecraft.com. There are 14 episodes. We go all over the place from foundations all the way to social justice. It's kind of awesome. And we got Season 2 just kicked off, and we're working on 2 different structures. And we've got some great partners, and we're going to play around with some materials and do some backyard science again. It should be a lot of fun. So there, I'll do a pitch for those guys.
I very recently enjoyed all of Season 1. It was quite nice. Thank you again for bringing that to my attention, and great plug, Ben. Next up, Michael Ingley, who probably does know the 5 Passive House principles. Michael's a partner at Baxt Ingley Architects, where he spearheads the firm's Passive House efforts. That was my cue to know who to ask. He's also founder of the Passive House Accelerator, and he helped form BIA Interior Studio. Michael has spoken at many national and international conferences, including Passive House Institute's 25th anniversary of Passive House in Darmstadt, Germany, and most recently in China. Thank you for bouncing around the globe to end up back here with BS and beer. What are you drinking, Michael? And what are those 5 principles?
There you go. I'm doing an other half Ace in Space. Happens to be a few blocks away, so it's easy. So cheers.
Nice. Cheers.
And I'm going to do them right this time, Sean. My 5 are different from everyone else's because I don't like to describe them this way. But you've got no thermal bridging, superior windows, mechanical ventilation, heat recovery, quality insulation, and airtight construction. But I promise, I usually do it via amenity because none of my clients care about any of those. So, but I'll do it the right way.
I think many of us are all too familiar with that same problem.
I actually have a chart that I show people, what Passive House folks say and what my clients say. So I usually say, instead of that, I'm like, hey, if you don't want bugs or dust, do a Passive House. If you want filtered fresh air 24/7, do a Passive House. They didn't know they could have either one of those. So once they never get past that, they want a Passive House or whatever I told them it was. It doesn't matter because in New York City to have that, it's like, what? So anyway.
Next level goodness.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We are also fortunate to be joined by Trevor Holtz. Trevor is co-founder of Thomas Martin Builders, which manages commercial and residential projects. The design build firm works throughout Metro New York on projects that include restaurants, tap rooms, bars, and retail spaces. Residential projects include restoration, renovation, and sustainability work. Trevor, I'm excited to meet you. Hello, thanks for joining us. If you unmute and tell us what you're drinking and what I missed in introducing you, we're grateful to have you join us tonight.
Hello, unmuted. Nice to meet everybody. I am drinking something from Millhouse Brewing. It's right in the Hudson Valley, Poughkeepsie, New York, right across the river. We are up in Ulster County. We recently relocated back where we are from. We are no longer in the Metro New York area, but we are still working there. So nothing from Brooklyn today. This is a local. It's a double IPA. I'm also drinking my favorite cocktail, 50% pickle juice, 50% tonic water. Love it. Just highly recommend it for the summer season. So nice to meet all of you. Thank you for the invitation.
Wow. The 50-50, that's a serious drink.
Sometimes you throw some tequila in there too, but right now it's more about the hydration right now, so.
We used to have a bar where we would get Pibertinis, and a Pibertini was a PBR with a splash of pickle juice in it.
I'm all about that. That's fantastic.
It's an acquired taste.
I'm also an acquired taste.
You'll fit right in.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Trevor. And I know we have presentations. Trevor, were you first? Were we moving it around? Who's going?
Definitely, let's move it around. I have to get that set up here.
Cool. Pick a mic, any mic. All Michaels can present.
You want to go first, Mike? Go for it.
Wait, me?
Away.
Away.
For the sake of ease here, because no one wants to try to pronounce your last name, even though you told us how to pronounce it, sir, you can call me Anshel and you can be Michael. How about that?
Love it.
All right. All right. Sharing the screen, right?
Gotcha.
And look at that. Can you guys see that?
Magic. Looks great.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I built this really quickly this afternoon. The weirdest thing about this, by the way, is that everything, like when you guys asked me about this, I was like, I hadn't really thought about it. And I think that it's still really hard for me to think about what we do that's different, because for us, this is all we know how to do. So I'm guessing, I think I'm guessing a little bit at what's different. So some of the challenges we face, obviously traffic, which is really time. And so, for us to get 3 miles can take half an hour. To get a mile can take half an hour sometimes. We also have, bicycles and pedestrians and stuff. So, there's that. I think some of our guys come in from the suburbs and that makes them mad. Parking is always an issue. Whenever there's a job site, and there's 3 trucks, that's like half the parking for the neighborhood. So getting in and out of the site, oftentimes dropping off materials and moving a vehicle so there's space for someone else to come in there. Also, we work with a really old housing stock, 1880 to 1940, sometimes 1960, 70, but pretty much every project is lead, asbestos. It's Minnesota, so we're right on intense here. Also, most of our structures are balloon framed, and oftentimes they've been heavily remodeled, which is another way of saying hacked to bits. I think we had a photo that we put on Instagram a while back with our decorative joists, decorative framing, because it had been cut into so many times. And then we use a lot of stucco here, which we're super used to, but people sometimes think it's really weird that we have so much stucco and that we like putting it up. Materials, delivery and staging can be interesting. That photo is of a pretty decent spacing between houses and an insane driver. Booms and cranes, sometimes we can use them, but oftentimes there's so many mature trees in our city and power lines and stuff like that, or the street's too narrow so they can't set out their rigging to support the crane, or there seems to always be a reason why we have to haul it up by hand. So also building materials cost a lot more in the city in general. So I know everyone loves talking about the price of wood today, but you can just, always add, probably 15-20% when you get into the city here, plus the 8% tax. So that's nice. This I just thought was funny. This was Building Resilience Season 1, and I grabbed these photos because at every stage of the project we had to put everything in the front, and then as the next material load came in, play this weird shuffling game. There was we moved materials back and forth and back and forth. It was we got really strong that summer. So things that we city folk are used to assume that everyone else dealt with, but I guess that's not always the case. Permits, every job for us has a permit. Every job has demo permits, dumpster permits, building permits, individual trade permits. We have codes that we have to follow. And again, I think that's a pretty normal thing, but some don't. And then we have our zoning codes that have all our setbacks. We have site permeability rules. We have lot coverage rules. We have design guidelines. Houses can't have different roof types than already exist in the neighborhoods without variance. And we have watersheds. Can you guys see this one? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
You're good.
You guys are so quiet. You're just letting me talk. It feels weird.
We were paying attention. Should we stop?
We can also interrupt if it makes you more comfortable.
Then let's start a side conversation.
There you go. So for us, we have to basically prove to the city that we're going to maintain an impervious surface ratio on every project. And we have a lot of non-conforming sites as well. Like this one where, here's the property line and we're obviously not 5 feet from the property line, which we do a lot of variances here. Although I should note our permitting process compared to what I hear the permitting process is in New York or San Francisco is quite different, where we can obtain a building permit for a project like this, in 2 weeks, quite easily. I've heard that it takes longer elsewhere. We also have to do all these glazing calculations here. We have minimum glazing requirements. So in the city, we actually we have to maintain, I forget if it's 50% or 53%, but there's a percentage of glazing that we have to achieve in an elevation. So that is in some ways at odds with what the energy nerds are looking for, with less windows, but the design guidelines that want houses to have windows for, I think for aesthetic reasons largely, but also because we've had a bunch of developers come into the city and build, cheap stuff that didn't provide good light for the occupants. So they pushed back against that and said, no, the existing housing stock has lots of windows. You have to continue that tradition of lots of windows. More stuff, dumpsters, where to put the dumpster. Our dumpsters get pulled off. We have a lot of snow here in Minneapolis, and anytime they declare a snow emergency, which is probably 20, 30 times in the course of a winter, the dumpsters get pulled, whether or not there's stuff in them, and we pay for that dumpster. So it's $350 every time there's a snow emergency or they decide to clean the streets. Neighborhood contributions is also a thing for us. Odd sofas show up, but most irritating is dog poop. I don't know why people think that a big giant open dumpster is the place to throw your pet's poo, but it happens. We have theft in the city here. So securing the job sites and materials, if we leave them out, especially if they're metal, they'll disappear. Condos are their own special kind of hell. We don't love them at all. Elevators, hallway protections, log in, log outs, super restrictive time, operation times. We have lots of neighbors, and people live in close proximity to their neighbors, and projects involve oftentimes neighborhood negotiation, keeping neighbors happy. They can get really weird about anybody parking in front of their home, even though that property doesn't belong to them. If there's dust, they'll get weird about the dust being out there. Smoking, we have policies that don't allow anyone to smoke on the job site or within 200 feet of the job site because neighbors will complain about that. Neighbors are a lot of work. And then we have an educated population in the city. We joke that, you head north a few miles and COVID disappears magically. IQ points drop as well, I'd argue. That's a little dig for my suburban friends. But they tend to, they'll research noise ordinances, they'll research zoning, they'll research code laws, and we will sometimes get inspectors showing up saying, neighbor has called about concern about X, Y, and Z, and come out to verify that in fact we're not in violation of the code. I don't think that's really a bad thing. It's just part of the package. And then we have extra rules here in the city of Minneapolis. We have special rules for sick and overtime pay calculations that we have to track. We pay a higher tax than other places. We have very specific start and end times for noise that are enforced, and of course road restrictions. And so that's what I could think of. So there we go.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, awesome. Was it might be normal for you, but some of those things are definitely not normal for us. We get a lot of snow in Maine. I don't do a whole lot of work in Portland, but I've never had a dumpster taken for snow removal. That was a new one. Yeah.
Well, and I should note our zoning laws are constantly changing. Someone just asked about 2040. I feel like every time we go to the city with a set of drawings, they're like, oh, we've changed another rule, and now you got to do these things. And again, it's like, yeah, part and parcel.
That's true. So Michael, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in. All right. You guys see it?
We've got you.
Cool. So I'll go through this pretty quick. You know, I will say it is a very similar set of items. I mean, so these are the types of projects our office does. We do a lot of, although we do work out of the city as well. We do suburban work, residential work, condo work, and I agree with you. You know, different types of contractors are set up to work in condos. They're set up to work out of the city, and then some are set up to work in an urban environment. I'll talk more about that now. But you know, our clients don't want to know which one's a passive house. By the way, the city doesn't want to know. Most of the work that we focus on is really kind of restoring some of these houses as well, and work with a lot of really great artisans and great contractors that were really lucky. I did almost no drawings for the details in the front facade to the right. We just worked with a person who just knew how to do it. He just did. There was a house to the left that had it, and you know, so we get really lucky. So this is the type of projects we do. Before and after, the door that's back here is the door that's back here. This kind of stuff. But you know, our houses are really leaky, and they're old and they're bad, and you know, a lot of people think that it's just leaky through the windows or from the stack effect. We always tell our clients that when you put on your exhaust fans, you know, all that fresh air you thought you were getting in from all those places, you know, is coming from a good spot, and you got 100 CFM or 400 CFM leaving the house. It's got to come in from somewhere. But in an urban environment, it's also coming from places that are really, really bad, like from your neighbors. So this is a real project with a real situation where I don't know for how many years the neighbors' flue had been exhausting into this house. And so every time they're putting their exhaust fan on, they're kind of dealing with that. And we see this all the time. There's nothing wrong with this joist. You're getting all your fresh air from your neighbor's home here, and bugs and dust. And same with this, same with this. And then we air seal it. It's why, in my opinion, passive house or any kind of high performance building that requires you to seal your party walls is such an easy sell in our area. You know, you show people, you know, this versus that, and you know, they want it. So, but for me, you know, just to kind of focus a little bit more on the contractor, I'll tell the story of my morning walk when I happened to run into a site super at 8:15 in the morning. I'm on a narrow block. It's in Brooklyn Heights Historic District. He's having a coffee outside, and he's cool as a cucumber, and we're just talking. And I'm realizing at the same time there's a dumpster swap, which it was just described as well. But you know, that means there's a dumpster behind me sitting in the middle of a street, blocking traffic. Well, it's not really blocking traffic, but it's parked there. The dumpster's got to come in. He's got to pick this one up. He's got to leave. All this is going on at the same time. You can see in the back they've got the pump truck going because they're pumping concrete on the second floor on a parapet. He's got the plumber piping utilities in the cellar. There's brick installation happening on the garden floor. The concrete, which I mentioned, is being pumped. He's got HVAC on the on the third floor. And then air sealing is happening on with Kevin Brennan on the fourth floor. So for me, kind of describing like what a good GC is in the city, and not that they wouldn't have to do this everywhere else as well. But the reason why he's having coffee outside on the sidewalk is the neighbors. He already set up that whole crew inside. There's probably 30 people in that house working. You wouldn't know it until you walk through. It's not crazy. It doesn't seem like pandemonium. It all feels calm, and he's having his coffee there. He's having it there because of the neighbors. Because when I polled all the contractors we worked with, neighbors was their number one item in terms of difficult issues in the city. And he's doing it because there's just a lot of stuff going on. So, you know, we talked about dumpster swaps, but what happens in New York City very often is you're on a street where you can't do a dumpster. So everything that is leaving your site is coming out in a bucket, and it's going into a truck, and it's leaving. It's double parked and probably has to go around the block a few times if another truck comes. So it's just knowing how to deal with this that I always look in awe at the contractors who can do it well. This is M2 Contracting. This is a quote from him. This is for me a window delivery in Brooklyn going correctly. Our first passive house set of windows showed up in a container truck, 6 feet in the air, not a forklift in sight. I don't know where they thought they were delivering. 3 people on site. There's just no way. I mean, some of these windows are like 1,000 pounds, and they're being carried in by all the people who are now waiting here because Max had it set up. We paid extra to get it craned over, but they still had to carry these kind of through the site. Just making sure that you've got the right amount of people there and ready for it is pretty huge. Same thing. I will say I feel very guilty. I made fun of the crew here, and I did help a little bit. But all right, they had you have opposite side, and they're going to get ticketed, and they're going to get summons if they don't get this stuff off. So it's opposite side. They've got 3 hours by hand to get this pallet, and this pallet in. And in New York City, I would love to tell you that the municipalities, they understand the ramifications of how you have to have construction materials delivered, but they don't. They do love tickets. And so contractors right there, that's Max on his urban van right there, that bicycle. So it's just knowing kind of that sometimes you just need to get a crane for one tub because it's the only way it's getting into the house, and just biting the bullet and doing it and just knowing it. And so you don't waste any time. This is Kevin Brennan. So doing some air sealing on the top floor. Typically, this monster machine has to somehow get close to the house or get into the house or get covered so that we can do it. He got lucky here, but it's just kind of that proximity of like dealing with parking and the hydrant and so forth. And then, this is a whole special thing on neighbors. You can see the windows are painted because the neighbors or faux painted because the neighbors complained about the brown windows. So in this particular case, you've got the contractor who's sweeping. This is M2 again, where they're sweeping both neighbors. They've shoveled both neighbors. We're being really nice, and the neighbors are really nice, by the way, but still, it's a real issue. So, the neighbor challenges. So proximity, noise. In New York City, it's just the fact that they can call 311. And if they call 311, the building department's coming out and they're probably going to find a way to shut you down because it's hard for them not to. They come into a job site, and when they leave that job site, now you've got to go back to the building department and say, I didn't find one thing on this list. So it's a pretty tough thing. Can't use big machines, storage. And you have to work on a lot of these different factors, alternate side of the street parking, meter parking, that truck delivery with the windows, that they had a 3-hour window that they had to make it. Trucks aren't on time. They're just not. If they missed that window, they would have had to carry those the windows and doors from about 20 houses away over. It would have been the only way they could do it. So, and then I think the biggest issue is just budget. And just, as a contractor, everybody wants to know why in New York City, the average price is $500 or $600 a square foot. You can do it for $400 or $450 if you're really lucky, but very often it's getting to $700 or $800 a square foot if you're doing nice finishes. Why is it that outside of the city, literally 45 minutes out of the city, it's like $250 or $300 a square foot? It's just these massive differences. So when we have contractors who come in and they haven't done this, it's one of the big questions we ask. Are you really ready? Do you have the overhead ready? And then this is a quote from Kevin Brennan, and it's one of the positives of working in such a close proximity. We have a project right now, or one block where we've got 4 projects with 3 different contractors. They know each other. They're helping each other. They compete with each other. And this is a contractor collective that we like to do very often. This is like 20 different contractors that are kind of sharing notes and so forth. But I believe this is, I'm sure it happens in suburban environments as well, but in the urban environment where you cannot miss each other. You're not in your car, you're passing each other on the sidewalk. And there's a real camaraderie and a lot of sharing of notes and, hey, watch out, this is happening or that's happening, or hey, I need this. And it's fun to be around and it's fun to watch. And I think that's one of the massive positives to doing business in the city like this. So anyway, that's it for me. Thank you.
That was good stuff, Michael. Thank you,
Thanks.
sir. All right, Mr. Holtz, teed up, and it's all yours, sir.
So I specifically wanted to break down some numbers, and I think both Michaels did an amazing job of talking about the logistical challenges, which drive up those numbers. And it's something that to me became very important very quickly. I am not from New York City, and I did not grow up in the trades. I don't come from a trade family. My father had a white collar job his whole life. The very first project I took in New York City, it was because my entire operating assumption in life is, how hard could it be? I can probably figure it out. So the very first week, my first project in New York City, 2014, I spent $1,400 on parking tickets my very first week. How much did I budget for parking tickets? None. Because I didn't know. And it very quickly became clear to me that if you don't understand the cost of the city, you simply can't survive. You can't do business there. And currently, about half of my work is outside of NYC and half of it's in NYC. So let me see if I can pull this up here and show you an urban project and a suburban project, sort of which I'm doing in tandem, and show you the cost difference. And before we look at the cost differences, again, the Michaels did a great job of explaining, it's not building the project, it's the logistics. And that's been my experience, is there's a lot of amazing builders in New York City. There are so many amazing builders, a lot of them don't actually turn a profit. And the reason is because they know how to build, they don't know how to manage logistics, because that's really what it's about. Once you're inside the building, it's the same, whether you're in Ulster County or you're in another state or you're in New York City. Once you're in the building, you're probably fine. You're doing basically the same practices in terms of design, mechanicals, engineering, architecture. It's how do you get the things in and out of the building? That's where all of your costs really are. So let me pull this up quick. And that didn't work. I'm clicking share screen. Does that work? Open system. Okay, so that's not going to work.
You might have to select what you're going to share. If you hit share screen and then you get a window that pops up. If you have two monitors, so you have to pick something from that window. So if you have two monitors, it might show up on a different screen.
Okay.
Ben usually does an excellent pantomime, though, if you can just cue him.
That's my little monkey dance over here.
Well, again, it's all about data and numbers. I can give you the numbers. So this is not wanting to pull up.
That works too.
But let's just talk about the numbers, right? Because it's really not that sexy to look at pictures of numbers. I think we can all agree about that. So let me pull it up for myself. And so this is what the project is. Can everybody picture this? It is a remodel of one master bath, primary bath, one powder room. We're going to add an addition to the back of the house. It's a small addition. Let's say it's a 10 by 12 solarium. The solarium is going to have radiant heat, which means a fully insulated slab. We're going to put a deck on the back of the house that connects to the solarium. Okay, this sounds pretty simple so far. We're going to add some new HVAC for both bathrooms. We're going to add new exterior doors. Again, this is a very straightforward project. We're going to do the landscaping associated with this project. Okay, so here's the numbers.
Wait, hold on. Before the numbers, I think, shouldn't we guess at what we think the numbers are?
Ooh, I want to guess.
Sure, I would okay, so let's guess at what the number is and Michael, I'll give you a neighborhood. Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, Lafayette Avenue.
I guess first.
Sure, you're this New York City guy, right? You're in Brooklyn.
550.
Before I say anything,
Remember, you're hired.
I feel like you.
no.
So, like,
What is
you said
everybody?
bathroom.
A primary, so it's a full remodel, right? This is a full remodel, all the way down to the brick.
Got it.
Primary bath, powder room, adding a small addition to the back of the building, 10 by 12, right?
10 by 12.
10
He's
by
going
12.
to the score chart, folks.
We added we added a deck. Now, in New York City, one of the differences between suburbia is the deck has to be a fire-rated material. So it's a steel structure. It's not just pressure-treated lumber. But in both cases, it's topped with Ipe. Okay, so we can agree there are cost differences, but it's still just a 10 by 10 deck. It's got stairs. The doors were Marvin, always I buy Marvin, standard French exterior doors with a transom. Okay, that in and of itself is a fairly big
How many?
purchase. One set of doors, right? Double door, French
$5,000.
doors, and then one single door that leads out into the addition. Okay, and this is, we're doing kind of the same thing right now up in Ulster County. Okay, what did I leave out? Oh, and I said, and we had to add new mechanicals, obviously, for the exhaust for the bathroom.
All right, Angela, your time's up. What's your number?
Well, I was just trying to keep up with all of the crap. Like, he didn't
That's
make
it. That's it.
like
That's the
a
whole thing.
bathroom, you know, HVAC, you know, all over the place. I'm going to say that I'm going to go, the addition was $180. The deck was 30. The bathroom was 50. The powder room was 25. The HVAC was 20. And the steel deck, we don't do that here. We also don't use brick, but you know, whatever. E-Pay we also don't use because it's gross. So I don't know what I don't know. You're sitting
in the Midwest.
Like mid threes.
Okay, so Michael Ingley was spot on. It was a $500,000 budget. $500,000 budget. Now, let me give you, and here's the big difference in terms of build time. It was 16 weeks for the build in Brooklyn. That doesn't include 24 weeks for the planning and permitting process. 24 weeks.
Yep.
So, in the case of the project in Brooklyn, the gentleman was going to use this. It was the first floor of his house. He was planning to rent that out. So when you think of the fair market value of that, I always factor in holding costs. Okay, so the fair market rental on that was $3,500 a month. So 16-week build plus 24 weeks of just going through the process of getting a permit. How much revenue was that for the owner? Okay, so that's a big part, as we always want to talk about holding costs. Now, the actual breakdown for this, my average payroll for this came out to $166,000 for that 16-week build. Okay, that's for project manager, 2 lead carpenters, 2 assistants, and a laborer. The steel fabrication for the solarium and the deck, that was $55,000. The material costs, and this is pre-pandemic. Remember that, pre-pandemic. The material costs were, I think, around $25,000 to $30,000. The fixtures and finishes, just the fixtures and finishes, was $40,000. And then, you know, overhead's another $40,000. And then we're not including basically all the logistical costs. Just getting the debris, because you have to remember, if this is a brownstone in Brooklyn, all of the debris must be hand carried through the building, basically one bag at a time. It's not up here in Ulster County where I currently am, where because it's a backyard, you can get behind the building with the truck. You've got a dumpster. We don't have dumpsters. I've never actually had a dumpster on a project in Brooklyn. It's always been, we get a couple of minis or we do daily pickups, and the laborers have to individually bag everything, carry it through the, so for the excavation for the backyard, think about this, right? The structure's a 12 by 16 solarium, right? It's got a 6-inch thick slab that's fully insulated for radiant heat. And it had to have, by code, Michael could speak to this better, I can as an architect, I think we had to do a 2-foot haunch all the way around to meet NYC code, even though it was only a 1-story structure. All of the excavation, all of that dirt had to be carried through the home in trash bags, one bag at a time, by a team of 6 people to a truck on the street. So your debris removal for a project like this, you're talking $20,000 to $30,000 in debris removal. That's just physical labor and the trucks going back and forth. So to do this in Brooklyn, we're going to spend $500,000. Now, the same exact project up in Ulster County, where I currently am, you're talking a 12-week build time. You're talking a 12-week timeline for permits and plans, which includes, the architect drawing everything up. The average weekly payroll, not New York City rates, came to $81,000. So we're already at less than half the cost. And the MEP, and I forgot to mention the MEP in the previous, the mechanical came to $25,000. That is a pre-pandemic 2019 price. We all wish we had that now. The MEP up here in Ulster County, same exact thing, $4,000. $4,000. The steel fabrication, and I just left that number static for the deck because it's, I don't want to change that between PT and steel. Let's assume that's 55,000. And material cost isn't that much different up here. Let's assume the same fixtures and finishes. If you're buying something from Signature Hardware off the website, they don't care where you are. A $1,200 faucet is still going to be a $1,200 faucet. Overhead is significantly less up here in Ulster County, $20,000. The total project budget based on those project that we're currently just starting, it's all in about 225. So it's basically same level of finish, same fixtures, the same company is doing the work, as Thomas Martin Build. Our costs are massively different. And a huge part of it is just the fact that it's Ulster County. You can park a truck in the backyard and hire a local company to put the debris right in the truck and drive away. And it's the big logistical thing, Michael, you'll know, this other project on Lafayette, right in front of the bus stop. Do you know what it's like trying to renovate a brownstone when it's directly in front of the bus stop and you need to get deliveries in and out on a regular basis and you're fighting a city bus and there's no parking and alternate side and all 6 of your carpenters couldn't find a space because they all drove in that day. So at 10 o'clock, they all run out because they all have to grab their vehicle to drive to the other side of the street so they don't get a ticket and double park. An hour later, they're all going to run back outside to try to go back to get a parking space. And in an 8-hour workday, maybe they work 5 hours, not including the time that you spent if you didn't take the subway looking for a parking space yourself. And if you do take the subway, that's a whole different challenge and expense. So you can literally take a budget anywhere outside of Metro New York. And I've built on Long Island, Westchester, Ulster County, Orange County. If somebody calls me and says, Brooklyn, Manhattan, I've got this project, the budget's automatically going to be double. And it's the logistics. It's not the quality of the project or the quality of the staff or the quality of the fixtures. And oftentimes it might be the same architect who calls me for Westchester as Brooklyn, or who calls me for Ulster County, or even Hudson, New York as Brooklyn. It doesn't matter. The same quality of project will cost twice as much.
Trevor, you made a really great point, and it's something that comes up a lot in some of our groups where people talk about how long a project should take. Like a bathroom remodel or a kitchen remodel, and people will say, "Oh, we can do a kitchen in 6 weeks," and I look at them like, "How is that even possible?" This is not right. No. Kitchen remodel is 10 to 12 weeks, period.
Absolutely.
Your number of inspections, scheduling them, and waiting for them to come. I mean, just that alone.
And so it's sequential. It's a sequential project.
Yeah. Time is a huge factor in these projects.
Yeah, I do want to point out, we just finished the brownstone. We're finishing it today. I was there meeting the plumber, all the final little details going in. I asked him what the permit is, or I'm sorry, the inspection is going to be like, and he said, it could be 2 weeks, could be 4 weeks. Again, the owner hasn't decided to sell the house, by the way. We started the project pre-pandemic. That's how long ago, 2019, we started the project. The project was shut down for a year. In the intervening time, he said, you know what? I've decided to sell this house. I don't want to live here anymore. Has an accepted offer. And we don't know when he's going to be able to sell it because it's contingent upon having a CO. So we have to get through plumbing inspection. Then we have to get through final inspection. When's that going to be? I don't know right now. I don't know. Michael might know better than me how long it's taken to get inspections.
You're actually bringing up an interesting point. I mean, well, 2 things. One, everything you're describing is the reason why in our office, and it's really been, it's protecting them as much as us. I will never be, unless I have to be, I will never be the first architect with a contractor who's doing work from Long Island to Brooklyn or Manhattan. They just, if they haven't figured it out yet, or if they just not have like a boatload, or if it's not cost plus, if they haven't figured out all those crazy expenses, it's hard to watch. It's painful. I mean, especially if you like the person. I mean, they're dying. I mean, especially if they're on like a stipulated sum and the client is like, oh, I got this guy at a great deal. Because you get clients who are just they'll ride with that. But the other issue is in New York City, unlike the work we do out in Long Island, where the same building inspector is the same person who's coming out. You've got 5 or 10 or 15 plumbing inspectors. So the plumbing inspector might not agree with the person who examined their drawings. The chances of you passing is, 70%. And then when you don't pass and you fix whatever he liked, the next person who comes in, the chances of passing are like 95%. You still have 5%. And then it's just what it is in a larger city where you've got multiple people. And it's nothing that New York City is doing wrong, although I'd love to complain about them. It's just a lot of people, and you could never send out the same person to every site. So it's just, the C of O process from completion and the start to completion, when you get your first plumbing and then electrical, then construction sign off, it's about 8 months. It's painful.
Yeah,
And,
I was going to ask that too, because you have a $500,000 budget for that, and maybe I missed it, but Michael, what are the architecture fees on that to get to your $500,000 budget beforehand?
I
And
didn't include that.
my understanding from taking the Passive House course in New York City at the time too was that you have additional reviews that have to happen beforehand too. So you have not only your drawings, but you have to have somebody else review your drawings before they go to permit. So what's the additional cost on how much extra drawing do you have to do for those building departments to make sure that gets
right now
like
in New York,
to it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then right now in New York City, it's become a little bit more interesting because they've just separated the filings. So we have to file for that. It doesn't matter if I have to file something that requires an addition, no matter how small the addition is. I have to file an architectural, a structural, a mechanical, and a plumbing. That's 4 things that I have to file. That's 4 sets of drawings, which will be similar, and we'll use copy and paste and so forth. But it's still 4 drawings. The reason they're doing it is so that when the 4 inspectors go in the end, they only have to look at their thing. But it's 4 filing fees, 4 schedules, 4 sign-offs. So in New York City, it's a little bit of a labyrinth. It's why people use expediters, and so that's an additional what you're kind of describing when you're in. It's why you have to have them look at it because they know what they're going to have to do when you sign it off. So you want to file it the right way at the beginning, so it's easy to sign off in the end. Because if you do it too quick at the beginning, because there are faster ways to file, but you're never getting it signed off. And then knowing how to go through that process, it's not so horrible. It's just that you know when to start the process. We've had long lead time plumbing fixtures, and we put a cheap plumbing fixture in its place. We've done things where we've got long lead. We do it with lighting all the time. We've got long lead time lighting. We put a temp fixture in all the time. It's just knowing to do that and having contractors who are kind of really set up to do that, I think is important. But that's all extra money. That electrician just installed all those lights twice, by the way.
Wait, so I want to know how much does it cost for your storage unit that's holding on to all of these extra light fixtures and plumbing fixtures? You're like, I was just gonna go recycle that, but I've got to pay like $1,000 a month for this storage unit that has all my extra things in it.
Now, if you're not selling your house, though, you can live happily in these houses while this is going on. They don't have to be signed off. It's just if you're doing a change of use or if you're selling it, they don't make you wait for the process. But it's painful. It's long. And then the contractor doesn't get paid until it's signed off. So you can have a contractor who is fully paid 10% retainage on a decent sized project, and it's just sitting there. And from the client's perspective, you don't know what the building department's going to say. So why would you ever pay them? And they really don't know what they're going to say. So it's a tough battle.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of work in the city. I did have one thought. We did a remodel. It was an energy project, and we were doing dense packed cellulose, and we had one sprinkler head that didn't get covered, and it called the fire department. How many times do you have the fire department come, and how much does it cost you if the fire department has to come?
Actually, if one of the contractors that I'm working with is, because I think a few of them are on, they should answer it. But I'm pretty sure they come into our jobs monthly, and they don't charge. But I think they literally walk through the jobs monthly, all of them. And if they don't like what you're doing at first, they make you change it. If you haven't changed it by the time they come through the next time, it's a problem. But yeah, they don't. But I think I hear what you're saying. With the sprinkler head, that'd be pretty crazy.
Something struck me that Trevor brought up, and I have some background doing work in the city when I was younger, doing millwork installs, and then I was working in Portland, Maine, not too long ago. And the fire codes and regulations for sprinkler systems and non-combustibles and party walls and stuff like that is something that once you get outside of the city, we don't often have to deal with, except for in really bizarre situations. So that's a whole nother set of skills that you have to be aware of. And, Michael, you brought something up about, first time contractors coming into the city. I remember, working in the city and finding out about all the oddball, code regulations that are in place there, like, still hot mopping shower pans and stuff like that, because it was, the accepted way of waterproofing in multi-story applications. And like, to us outside of the city, that's like 50-year-old technology, but it works and it's still, stuck. Or lead pan, showers and stuff like that. So there's weird little nuances that a lot of people don't understand. So something that's, this isn't particularly building sciencey, but maybe Mr. Anshel, you can speak about keeping neighbors happy and, how to do that. Any strategies for dealing with neighbors when you're in tight confines, because you're going to get up close and personal with them.
I mean, yeah, I think that contractor in the street with the cup of coffee. Yeah, let's talk about my grass. Thanks, Bales. Yeah. I don't know if do we have time for a quick story?
Sure. Go ahead.
No, we're all out of time. Thanks, everyone. Please proceed, Mike.
So early in the early days of Green Star, we had this, instead of doing Kentucky bluegrass, we're trying to get people to do drought tolerant, grasses and different plantings. And so we encourage the use of the sheep fescue, which is a really beautiful grass, and it grows in kind of waves and stuff like that. And it sends up these seed stalks, and the seed stalks get fairly tall, and it's how it reseeds itself, right? And it's a no-mow grass as well, so you can just kind of let it go. Anyway, so I was traveling, I forget where I was out talking or doing something, and the city sent a notice to my house: your grass is too long. I wasn't there. I came back, I discovered that they had mowed down this $10,000 sustainable yard, and the city has a sustainable initiative, and we were in keeping with that. But of course, the left hand doesn't always talk to the right hand, and it was, the mayor reached out. He's like, "Oh my God, dude, I'm so sorry. This this really sucks." It made the news. It was like the lawn arm of the law gives man $200 haircut. They charged me $200 to mow it. It took another 3 years to get it all to come back. Anyway, so, but it was a neighbor who had called it in because it didn't fit what they thought it was supposed to look like. And so we had to, the positive was we ended up developing a new, not a lawn policy, but a yard ordinance. So now in the city of Minneapolis, because lawn is defined as grass, we have a yard ordinance. And in the yard ordinance, you can have a lawn or something else. And the other thing can be, plantings and stuff, but they can't encroach on the right of way, and they can't exceed a certain height, but that height is higher than the 4 inches that's normally allowed. So, Ben, to your question, we send a letter out to all of the neighbors. Hey, we're going to be working in your neighborhood. We give them our project manager's home address and phone number so that they can. No, we don't do that. That would
home address. Woof. my stomach tensed up when you said that.
We're hiring. You want to come?
I'm all set. Thank you very much.
So, we say, here's how you get in touch with us. We're sorry for the noise, the dust, et cetera, et cetera. We put up signage usually that says no construction parking, on the, for neighbors who have, some neighbors will reach out and say, hey, I'd like to have access to my stairs. And I think that the part of that though is that the subcontractors that we use are city folks, right? In Minneapolis, all of the specialty trades have to get a special extra permit. So plumbers who work in the rural areas or the suburbs don't hold Minneapolis or St. Paul permits. In fact, there's plumbers who don't hold Minneapolis, but not St. Paul, and vice versa. So who you use, who you're able to use, city to city changes, but they're usually really dialed into, you know, you're in this urban environment and half of your day is schlepping your stuff from the van and in. And P.S. don't take a shortcut over the neighbor's, you know, yard. You know, I get that New York, you don't have yards. We still have their postage stamp size, but we still do have them. You know, and man, Minneapolis is also, I should note, it's a very, very liberal city. And it is also a fairly wealthy city. And so people are like very engaged and they want to talk, right? But they're also very particular. Mm-hmm. So it's this weird thing where we're Minnesota nice, we're really friendly, but we're secretly like, I think you're standing on my lawn there, you know, your heel, I think, is technically over the line.
You know, what's interesting, a lot of our contractors, by the way, have subsequently done, in some cases, a lot of work for the neighbors. So, you know, I kind of feel like, you know, a lot of the contractors, I think you're kind of describing it perfectly, Michael, kind of the way I see it, at least. And I think sometimes you're doing it because you have to do it, because, you know, if you don't, you know, you're done. But, you know, you wind up building relationships and they want to do work. And all of a sudden they see what you're doing next door. It's the best job interview ever. And they want to do their kitchen. They want to do their bathroom. So we've had contractors who've done 15 houses on one block. And we didn't get any of them except for the first one, but they fell in love with the contractor. They fell in love with the site super. You know, they start to build relationships with these people. So I feel like contractors who really get that and know how to do that well, I think they do really well. I think there's just no better advertisement.
Something Michael mentioned that, you know, I picked up years ago is really invaluable. It's just that letter in the mailbox of all the neighbors surrounding before you even start the project, just saying, hey, here we are, we're going to be working here. Here's our phone numbers. Here's how to contact us if you have any questions or comments. Something that came to mind while we've been discussing this is, are your crews and staffs and subs, do they live in the city? Maybe Trevor, you can talk to this a little bit. Can your employees afford to live in the city, or is everybody traveling in from outside of the city?
That's a really great question, because it's gotten increasingly difficult, honestly. And so our New York City crew has nothing to do with our crew outside the city, just to be clear, for obvious reasons. It's so difficult to get out of the city. I left Brooklyn today at 2:30 and I got here at 6 o'clock. It's 100 miles, do the math. So the city crew, they mostly, like, they keep moving farther. It's an interesting sort of, they get farther and farther and farther from, let's say, Brooklyn proper, right? So my Brooklyn crew is almost entirely Russian, just to be clear. They all live over Sheepshead Bay. That's partly because it's an old Russian neighborhood, but partly it's, they sort of migrated. They used to be in Williamsburg. Well, nobody can afford to live in Williamsburg anymore. At least they can't. So they initially moved, I think, to Sunset Park. It's a couple of brothers and a cousin. And now they're all the way back, technically home, Sheepshead Bay. So they almost consider it commuting into Brooklyn proper now, because that's like the most southern end of Brooklyn. My other couple of staff guys, they were in Williamsburg, and I think now they're all the way up in the Heights, Upper Manhattan. So it actually takes them almost an hour and a half by train, by subway, to get from where they are in Manhattan to a project in Brooklyn. So it's easy to get lost in the idea that people who live outside of New York City are commuters. But if you live in Manhattan and you're going to Brooklyn and you're on the subway, you're commuting. It might take you an hour and a half to 2 hours to get there. Think about the walking distance. If you have to walk from your apartment to the train, and that's a 20-minute walk, the train ride's an hour and a half, and then you have to walk 20 minutes to the project site, how much of your day is consumed with just, again, logistics, the schlep, getting from point A to point B? So maybe you take the train, maybe you drive. Either way, just getting through the city. This morning I had to make 2 stops. Once in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And then I had to go to Bed-Stuy. It took me an hour and 15 minutes at 7 o'clock in the morning to get from Williamsburg to Bed-Stuy. I don't, what is that, like 5 miles?
Yeah.
Something like that, 5 miles. It took me an hour and 15 minutes in traffic, and then it took me 20 minutes to find a parking space.
Mhm.
So if you're not planning on that, and you have to remember that with your crew, and one of the things that we really, really strive for as a company is that we want everybody to be paid a living wage and a fair wage, a wage that allows them to actually live near the place that they work. I don't want people to have to commute in from New York City. I don't want to find out the guys can't be close to the neighborhood they want to be. And that's part of our budget, by the way. We do factor that in. We want to pay what we think people are worth. Well, what's a fair wage? And we want to make sure that they know that we value them as people. And also they value us, right? It all sort of works together, that it's a two-way street. That's what creates a team, right? That's why they're willing to do the things that we ask them to do, to spend that hour and a half on a train, to spend that hour and 45 minutes maybe schlepping things in their truck across town. It's because they know that it's a quality project, and they know that we care about the end product, and we care about them, and we care about the client, and they're willing to do that. But we've lost 12 employees in the past year, all of whom who said, like, we just can't afford to be here anymore. One went back to Minnesota, just didn't want to be here anymore. And the rest, I don't remember where they moved to. You know, it's sort of like all over the US. A lot of them just decided during the pandemic, it costs so much to be here. I'm trapped in this studio apartment for $3,000 a month. I think I'm going to go home. So the skills gap, as we like to talk about, it's been huge for us this past year during the pandemic. We lost 12 employees, one of whom was our operations manager. You know what it's like to lose your operations manager? Disaster. She pretty much made everything happen for us behind the scenes, you know, and with 3 kids at home because they were not in school. Like she said, I just can't do this. It's just not possible. A full-time job. So as I've now tried to find new people, I've called a lot of people I know in the city, and every guy I call has said, yeah, I'm in the same sort of situation. A lot of my guys left, and they left the city. They don't want to come back. When you realize your entire life is in an 800 square foot space and you can't go outside, New York City is really not that appealing anymore. So it is going to come back, right? We all know it's going to come back. How long is it going to take? I don't know, but I've had a dozen calls in the past 2 weeks for projects, either in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Manhattan. And I hate saying no, but I don't have the staff for it. Like, we're down to 3 people in NYC right now who live there, who work there for us. Everybody else has left, and everyone I've called has said the same thing. We've lost so many staff who've realized either it's not worth the cost of being here, or, you know what, it's kind of nice to live in a place where I can actually go outside and not feel so packed in and not be worried about the pandemic. You know, like, I'm back in Ulster County for a reason. We were living in an extremely, extremely small space with 3 children. And there's a certain point you realize, is this the lifestyle we want? No, right? So we went back to Ulster County. Long term, am I going to be in New York City every day? No, it took 4 hours to get here. We're transitioning out. We're not going to ever shut down entirely. I'm trying to figure out, how do I maybe get a studio apartment for myself so that I can be there more and not have to make that drive every day. Those are the sorts of things that a lot of contractors, not just me, think about logistically. I know a lot of guys who have a studio apartment that's just for them. That I was just in Brooklyn or Manhattan for 12 hours for today. I had 6 meetings. I'm not making the trip back out to Long Island or to Westchester. I'm going to sleep at my apartment for the night, and I'll go home tomorrow. That's sort of a normal. I did that actually my first 6 months. I slept at the office for the first 6 months when I first started working in New York City, because I didn't like the 5-hour round trip. So
it's the new co-share work environment. You need to find like 3 other contractors who also want to share your studio apartment.
That's so brilliant.
It's a stupid but brilliant idea, right? Like, if you're not all there at the same time, you just have like a crash pad, wash the sheets when you leave, like, see you next week.
I will say what's
Beats sleeping
happening
in the van.
Again,
But what's happening in New York City right now is incredibly. I think it's happening everywhere, first of all. But what's happening in New York City? Well, let's talk about what's happening everywhere, because I think it's very exciting. But as a business owner, it's incredibly difficult. As people come out of their COVID cocoon, they're starting to ask themselves, or during COVID, they're asking themselves, they thought, hey, maybe I die. What do I want to do? Where do I belong in life? Did I do everything I wanted to do? Am I living where I want to live? Am I doing what I want to do? So as a business owner, you have to deal with that, because everybody's starting to question it. And but I can tell you, New York City's just bananas now. All the people who left and all the apartments that you couldn't sell, everyone's buying them now. All the houses, I kind of see it too, Trevor. It's just kind of an onslaught. And I think a lot of contractors have moved out. I think a ton of people have moved, contractors and subs are moving back in. I think New York City is that weird transient place where things come out, things go in, things come out, things go in. And it's what I love about it, because you get the new people all the time. But it's and I'm seeing it. I'm meeting new people that I haven't met before, and new subs. And this person's got this new person. This person lost that person. But I think what's happening, and it should be, and I think we'll look back at this moment, 6 months or a year or 2 years from now, where, where were you pre-COVID? Where were you after COVID? And how did it affect your life? And, where am I going from here? And I think it's great that everyone had the ability to take that, whether they wanted to take that break or not is another story, but you had the ability to take that break in life and think about, where do I want to be? But as a business owner, Trevor, I hear you. A lot of people are deciding it's not here, wherever here is, and it's a little painful.
then us, I'm hour and a half north of the city, we're just bombarded by the exodus. It's everybody that's wanting the country house now. They don't want to do it anymore. They don't want to be in the city anymore. They don't want to play the game. So we're just absolutely slammed up here outside of the city with everybody moving out. I think you're totally right, Michael. I think it's New York always kind of replenishes itself. Any city seems to always kind of replenish itself. So what's the new model going to be?
That'll be interesting.
That's a big part of our phone calls right now for potential clients, though, it's market shift. I never in the 6 years that we've had this business had a phone call for anybody outside of New York City, right? Maybe 1 or 2 aberrant phone calls a year. And we've had a dozen phone calls in the past 2 months, all of whom were city people who said, I bought a house in Hudson. I bought a house in New Paltz. I bought a house in Rhinebeck. I bought a house in Irvington. Somewhere, and I want to relocate, or it's my weekend house, but I'm going to be there most of the time. How soon can you start? Well, let me refer you to an architect, and maybe 6 months to a year from now, we can get to it. But the exodus has gone out. But I'm also hearing from a lot of our clients who we've done work with in the city who just did spend a year upstate, as they like to call it. It's not technically, but let's say it's upstate.
Anything north of Yonkers.
Yeah, anything north of Yonkers, this is downstate. And they've called me and said, what do you do up here? There's nothing to do. Where do you go? My favorite was a client who called me and said, hey, do you know how to meet women? I was like, no, I have no idea.
This is totally a side tangent, but we're building a house up in northwestern Connecticut for some clients out of the city, and one of the areas or spaces in the houses we're building is they're calling the tick room. So it's a spot because they're totally freaked out by bugs, and I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole. They're totally freaked out by bugs because they've lived in the city forever. So we have a room that enters off of the patio where they can come in, and we have mud set in, linear lighting, and mirrors so that they can come in, strip down, and do tick inspections before they basically leave the clean room and come into the house.
Wow. Wow.
It's interesting stuff. So.
That's a first.
Never heard of that. Make fun of home building.
I don't like ticks, but that's new.
For fun, I'm going to start designing it in. This is kind of delousing powders, spray heads. I'm going to say, in a schematic design, it's going to show up on a couple of schemes. Just to see if they notice it.
You need a little grate in the floor that you can sweep the ticks into,
Yeah,
You know?
like pressurized air curtains, like when you go into Home Depot or something like that. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're on to something here.
So I wanted to just note, because I thought it was interesting, and people in the comments were talking about the city exodus. I sat in on a presentation from Kermit Baker over at the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard and NAHB, and then locally heard a presentation. And interestingly enough, the data, it's the data versus what was being reported, what we get from our news sources, we're not necessarily in sync. And there was a lot of conversation about how everyone's fleeing the cities. So in the Twin Cities here, where popular belief is everyone has been fleeing the city, population of the city grew in 2020 during the pandemic. And despite George Floyd and the unrest in the city, our city population actually grew, and housing prices went quite a bit up. The number of million plus sales went up by something like 73%. And I can say, for us, our experience at any rate is project size jumped by about $200,000 on average per project in the city. And it's, so sometimes there is a disconnect between like our perception and what our social circles are and what's actually taking place.
I saw something, I'm not sure if it's something that you shared, Michael, but I saw something very similar that was talking about New York City. Everybody thinks that everybody's fleeing out of the city. And in reality, the total population lost 10,000 or something like that, which in a city of 19 million in the 5 boroughs is like,
it's nothing.
That's a shift. That's the shift in a week, just because of closing overlaps.
All I can say is we go through a lot of new projects with people as they're looking at houses, and they're losing in bidding wars all the time, all cash losing all the time, all throughout Brooklyn. And really what's happened now, which I think is interesting, the condo market in New York City and Manhattan died, but because people were wondering whether they wanted to be in a condo. But now they all want to be in a condo, and the prices came down enough where now everyone wants to be in a condo, and it's just getting flooded. So I think the news cycle will catch up to it, but it's the ebb and flow. Who knows?
Well, I know, just as a point of price, 2019, 2 of the brownstones that we started working on pre-pandemic, both, let's say they were going to list at 1.2 million, and they're both currently on the market for like 2.1, and they're going to get offers. Like, that's only 2 years ago. Everybody talked about how the housing market was crushed in New York City. And I have a friend with a house in Greenpoint, actually, he called me about, that we had renovated 3 or 4 years ago. And I think he said he just had it reappraised for like 2.7. And it's not, frankly, it's nice. It's like 2.7. Like, at what point do people just like 2.7? Like, that's insane. Because I think he paid like 800 for it, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're talking, the market return is crazy. So everybody who has said the market has been crushed in NYC, a lot of people I know anecdotally, they didn't flee New York City. They went to an Airbnb for a while, or they rented a place in the country. They didn't let go of their city home. Now they're going back after their experience, in Exodus. And
they're buying a property outside.
And they're buying a property outside, and the prices are going. And I can tell you, as somebody who is building a house in Ulster County instead of buying, I built it because the housing prices up here were crazy. People were literally walking into the realtor. I was calling the realtor and saying, I saw that you just listed that house. And he said, let me stop you right there. I already have an offer of 50,000 cash, more than they're asking. So unless you want to offer more right now, please don't tell me you want to look at it.
It's the same here. No contingencies, cash offers.
Cash offers. It was, I was like, I'm just going to build.
I think it's the same thing with the COVID cocoon. I think we can see this in lots of different industries and lots of different things. People didn't buy houses for a really long time, and they didn't leave because they couldn't. I mean, some did. I kind of broke the rules and went to a few houses because people were buying in COVID. Weird but true. But a lot of people didn't, and so now you just got this influx. And like, okay, it's safe. The interest rates are still low. I didn't lose my
Mhm.
job. The world didn't end. I'm still alive. And I think we're seeing it in all sorts of things, but in real estate, you see it big just because the numbers are, I mean, just astronomical. It's just pretty crazy.
There's a great comment in the chat that, a small aberration or exodus from the city is a huge impact on a small country town.
It's a good point.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that
talking about
10 New York 10,000 is like five or six little towns, the entire populations, right?
Yeah, then we were talking about this earlier today in Vermont, right? So somebody a contractor was driving down the road and they saw a realtor going the other way and they just called him and said, "Hey, did you just put property up for sale? I'd like to buy it," right? So
Wow.
they had just put the real estate sign on the piece of property and it never went any farther than that, right? Because like that's what's happening. Like they might not be letting go of their city real estate, but they're buying up country real estate, and finding a piece of property is like nearly impossible right now. But it is good to hear that in the city, you're not really seeing the exodus that they talked about. So
Yeah.
It's more of a commercial thing. Like, again, 50% of my projects have been commercial. The story that I'm hearing from residential clients and the story I'm hearing from commercial clients is completely different. Residential clients talk about, "I've been inconvenienced. This is uncomfortable. I don't know that I like this small apartment I live in." Commercial clients are saying, "My business is never going to recover. I owned a restaurant on 3rd and 76th, and we have no idea what to do. I've built 50 restaurants and bars in the past 6 years. The number of those places that closed, that were amazing places that you never thought would close, that closed in the past 6 months, is one place that we had renovated was open for 26 years. It was the premier vegan restaurant in all of New York City with a #2 rated chef in New York City. They closed after 26 years, after, we renovated it 4 years ago, beautiful place. Never thought they would close. Why did they close? The landlord decided to revoke all the leases for the commercial spaces. Why? Who knows? But he said it was all about the pandemic. Bars, Alameda closed, a couple of breweries I didn't build, but I was associated with those. The commercial thing is a meltdown. It is, because you have to remember, if you're spending 20 or 30,000 a month on rent in New York City and you have a staff of 15, which includes a chef, what's your overhead? So like that's an entirely different conversation when you talk about holding costs. And I will point this out to you, Michael, since you tried to build in New York City as an architect, do you know how many commercial clients I've tried to sell on the idea of sustainable building and building green and their building envelope, and how many blank stares and crickets? But we can reduce your energy costs, which reduces your operating costs. Still meaningless. Still goes nowhere. It has been so frustrating trying to sell the idea of sustainable or green or anything to a commercial client, because all they care about is, how much money am I going to make? How quickly can we open?
Right, especially for a 10 or 15-year lease, the payback just couldn't be fast enough if it's not part of their business model. But coming back to the restaurant, and we've kind of we don't do a lot of restaurants. We've just done a few, but I go to restaurants and bars, and and it's just interesting to see which ones have closed and which ones have opened. And sometimes it's just coming back to dealing with things and parking. If you're in front of a bus stop, you can't do outside seating in New York City. If you're in front of a hydrant, like all of a sudden, things you never thought about when you had that restaurant. If you're within 20 feet of a corner and there's a no stopping zone, you're not doing an outside cafe. And that made the difference for a lot of these folks. A lot of these folks barely held on. And then to realize that, oh my God, I can't put one outside, but they can and they can. And they're not even as good as me, but it doesn't matter. You're done. It's painful to watch. And I agree with you. I mean, some of these places you love. And a lot of them can hold on, but it's been as a restaurant owner, I mean, I can't imagine it would be tough.
So can I ask you specifically a question then, as an architect? I was driving through Brooklyn today, and I saw all of these shtetls all over the place where they're going to seat people for their, their coffee and their pastry. At what point does the NYC DOB start actually caring about the structural aspect of these? Because some of them look like death traps. Frankly. I was wondering, are they going to crack down on this or what? Because some of these, I wouldn't want to sit there.
All right, so I'm going to so I have not designed one on purpose,
Okay.
but I know a lot of other people who have, and if I have, I probably wouldn't say I did. But I can tell you. So what I've been told is that you're going to get ticketed, you're going to get fined, and you'll pay the fines, and that's life. You're not going to get shut down. You're not going to, so the city, you're not building. You didn't get it filed. You didn't tell anybody what you were doing. They're all wood in a place where it's got to be non-combustible. So you're going to get fined. You're going to get ticketed, but your restaurant won't go out of business. And that's how they've all been operating, which is really bananas. But
pay to play.
Yeah, and so I am personally not comfortable with that. So, but
it's better than them being shut down, I guess. Though.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm just not comfortable being the architect designing it. I'm comfortable with them doing it. I get
that. You need somewhere to sit, right?
Yeah.
I guess it's the big thing that's coming to mind for me with all of these, crazy things you guys go through working in the city. Do you ever long for, country life? Or are you guys hooked?
Yes. Well, I do. I'm from Long Island, so I spend a lot of time out in Long Island, and so I like being out of the city as much as I like being in the city. I like riding a bike. I like being outside, but I love city life. I mean, actually, I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn. I hate all seasons besides summer because I like being outside so much. But I like New York City, so I'm never gonna fix that one.
You can go outside in the winter.
I know, but it's cold.
Oh my God, Michael. I'm sorry, man.
I know, and I know.
I hate all seasons but winter. Winter is my favorite by far. I don't like the sweat.
It's funny, right?
Right?
Opposite.
Minnesota.
Opposite.
And it gets legitimately cold here. But
yeah,
I can always put clothes on, but I can't.
That's true.
Skin off.
And in New York City, it doesn't even get that cold anymore. So
no, it doesn't really.
It gets hot though.
Oh yeah.
And I think, like Trevor talked about in the very beginning, once you've figured out what you have to do, it probably becomes second nature for you, right? Like, Michael, you said you don't work with contractors who have never worked in the city before. It's too tough, right? You Trevor, you mentioned like you gotta have 50% in operations and figuring out how you're just gonna deal with and manage the stuff, right? Like here in Maine, probably the only city we really have to do any of this stuff in is Portland. It's a hassle if you don't work in Portland all the time. But if you only work in Portland, you just get used to the fact that you're going to get a different inspector. They're going to have different rules. They're going to look for different things, right? So you've in some ways just kind of learned to adapt and then prepared your clients for this is your scenario here, right? And so, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, you work in the city or you don't. and once you've kind of learned what the rules are, it's easy enough to kind of just deal with it. Like, I know it's going to take 24 weeks for us to get to this. So your project is next in the timeline at, X amount of time. And unfortunately, we're out of time because I wanted to talk about what makes it different to do high performance in the city. But, we're just clearly going to have you all back on to talk about high performance in the city and, dealing with that and heat islands and the whole, passive house, exterior facade and Brooklyn, man, all those houses are attached together. You showed some of those pictures. Like, there's nothing worse than your neighbor likes to cook fish every day and you smell that in your apartment, right? I mean, like, that's things that you don't run into. Although I think neighbors maybe more concentrated in the city, but neighbors are always a problem, no matter where you are. We say not in your backyard. You guys are probably like, not in my side yard, front yard, not parked in front of my street. Don't put your trash can like near it. But, I mean, neighbors are always like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So we're We're at the 7:30 timeline and I am the executioner. So last thoughts from all three of you guys real quick on, building in the city or challenges or why you love it or whatever you want to say about it. So Trevor, you're at the top of my screen. You get to go first.
I'm not in New York City because I have to be. I'm there because it gets into you and you can't stop going there. All of my best childhood memories are of New York City. So I went there literally with nothing. We started a company to go to New York City, just hoping it would succeed, and it did. And once you experience all of the cultures and all of the languages and all of the challenges and all the complexity, I'm building there because I love it, not because I have to. So I'll never be able to fully leave it and give it up. There's just something about being in Brooklyn or Manhattan and experiencing all those people and building this beautiful, amazing project and getting to experience that. You can't get that anywhere else. It's like I could go back to playing college ball or I could play for the New York Knicks. What are you going to do? I'm going to play for the New York Knicks.
Travis loved that. You just pulled in a basketball reference.
Yeah. Reference in BS and beer history. Trevor, you're my new best friend.
You're his new hero. All right, Angel, you're next up on my screen. Last thoughts, words, ideas. You're in a totally different city, not New York. So
yeah. So I'm born and bred Minneapolis, although my father's from New York and my mother's from England, and I've lived all over the world, and I love being part of this city. And I think, our clients, there's kind of like you were describing, Trevor, there is this love of the city. Our clients love being in Minneapolis, despite it being on fire and all that we feel like we're super just committed to being here. And so getting to practice, to lead a team of architects and contractors in this space and know that we're part of creating cool stuff in the city and to push the envelope with building technology and really in an area that really loves sustainability and fights for it, to have a whole city council that is really pushing us to go push even further. And they're like, yes, we'll write new rules to support you. I really love being a part of that ecosystem, and the idea of going to, the second ring burbs where, there's MAGA hats is just not even on the table for me. So.
Nice. All right, Michael Ingley, you're set to roll us out.
Yeah, so I will use my Kevin Brandon quote that I'm not even sure if it's Kevin's, by the way. I heard it from Kevin, which is passive house is a team sport, but it's not just passive house; it's contracting. And I feel one of the things that I love about doing work in the city and being so close in proximity to all the different people we're doing work with is just that camaraderie and how much is shared. And it's what drove me to the high performance building community as a whole. I mean, everybody's sharing everything. Where else do you do that? It's like weird. You're sharing with your competitors. But I really love that. I think it happens in an easier way when you're not in a car and not driving past each other. You have the choice. You're literally doing work next to each other. So I really love the team atmosphere and the collaborative atmosphere, even amongst competitors. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a construction, building, architecture, the client leg, it should be a team sport. And I think I totally agree with that. So thank you all for sharing your time with us tonight. I really appreciate it. It's fun to listen to. More power to you. I love living in the city for a short period of time, but don't even take on Portland projects in Maine. So I'm glad there are people like you willing to do them because it's not for me. Thank you so much.
Good night, all. Thank you all so much.
Good night, everyone.